We are live. This is Black Tower Radio. I am your host, Jake Fox, and we are broadcasting live on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL in Rochester, New York. Once again, I am your host, Jake Fox, and we are joined here by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer is a New York Times bestselling author. He was in Defense Intelligence for years. He was in charge of tracking Al-Qaeda pre-9/11. You can see him on Fox. I've seen him on MSNBC, CNN, BBC, foreign television. I mean, he's really anywhere, and anyone who listens to the show knows exactly who Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer is. Thank you again for coming on the show, Colonel Shaffer.
Jake, it's always truly a pleasure to join you. So thanks again for having me.
So I wanted to get into the whole Trump scandal. That's
sure.
Excuse me, the Trump scandal. That's not a scandal on his side. The scandal is on the investigation, in my opinion.
Right.
And this whole thing has been sloppily done. It seemed carelessly done. From everything that's come out, from Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, Simpson, Mifsud, Helper, all of these characters that are involved in this crime, in my opinion, it seemed like none of these characters thought that Trump would actually win, and none of this would get revealed to the public, and they would be safe. I mean, what is your take on the whole situation?
Well, I think it was, as the best summary was, an insurance policy. The premise was, I believe, because this was all well planned in its own way. I mean, but there was glaring oversights and errors on their side, thank goodness. And yeah, to your point, your fundamental point, had Hillary Clinton won, we would not know the specific details that we do now. We would have known some details because I would argue the whole setup was to ruin Trump after the fact, punish him. Trump's a very successful businessman, and I believe this whole setup was to be used to discredit him. Certain things would have been leaked out anyway, and the whole thing would have been shown by a Clinton White House that, oh my goodness, we dodged a bullet. Donald Trump was a Russian agent. And here's the people that were in contact with the Russians. It was going to be a man that they were going to fill in after the fact. And I do believe people like John Brennan, James Comey, the other characters you just mentioned, were all in on it. And it was designed, to your point. Nobody thought he was going to win. That's clear. The presumption up until, probably depending on who you talk to, either 8 p.m. or midnight, did they actually realize they were going to lose. And it was from that point on, it was transitioned into something else. They had to make it look more legitimate. They had to try to, after the fact, try to make it look like it was an honest investigation. And they failed. Obviously, people went after the FISA warrants. The latest revelations I've heard from my sources that the Orr hearing yesterday was very telling. He doesn't remember a lot, and his recollections are not consistent with other recollections. But it's a Page testimony a couple of weeks ago, I think, also provided some needed context of what was going on behind the scenes. So we would have known about it, but it would have been presented to us as a fait accompli. It would have been, oh my goodness, Trump is really a Russian agent, and boy, oh boy, are we lucky that Hillary Clinton got in. And we would have been told about the Russia collusion, but we would have had no context because all of the underlying documents would have been to this day classified, because they would have said, well, we can't show you why we know this, but just suffice to say that these are the people that were in contact, and these are the people who were prosecuted. So you would have seen prosecutions out of it, but it would have been a very different flavor. And so I think at this point, It's beyond sedition. I believe there was wrongdoing at all levels of the Obama White House. And remember, to launch some of these operations, as they were launched, we know that they were launched, there had to be a waiver given by the National Security Council, by Susan Rice. You simply cannot target a U.S. citizen who has no presumption of any involvement with intelligence and actually launch these investigations. And I've been on both sides of things. I've been an investigator as well as a target before intelligence service. I was going to be approached by the Russians for recruitment, and the FBI came and briefed me. It's like, hey, we know you're not we know your history, Colonel Shaffer. This is what's going on. The Anna Chapman cell was targeting me and my think tank. Back then it was the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. I still associate with them, but I don't work for them now. And during that time, they briefed my boss, Lieutenant Colonel retired Dave Johnson, on what was going on. It's required. Leave U.S. persons who are innocent in the dark on an investigation. So the presumption would have been, if there were a Russian sniffing around the Trump campaign, Trump himself or one of the seniors would have been briefed. Now, and the only way you can brief them is by having a waiver from the White House. So that links the entire picture back to Susan Rice, at minimum Susan Rice. I would argue she would not have done anything of this magnitude without some level of approval. The president himself at the time would be Barack Obama. So I think your instincts are correct, but I think you would have seen it play out a bit differently, and it would have been used as essentially a hammer to punish Donald Trump with.
To your point about the testimony regarding Lisa Page, Glenn Simpson, and Bruce Orr.
Yeah.
From what I've read, it looks as if, in their testimonies not matching up.
Right.
It looks, two of the three, from what I understand, are possibly committing perjury. Glenn Simpson's account doesn't match with Bruce Orr's, and Lisa Page, her account doesn't match with Bruce Orr. These guys were all involved in this case, and they're getting major details wrong. Details that could potentially get them charged with perjury down the line. It's very odd to me to see them so ham-handedly, try to cover this up. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're acting logically in this situation, almost like they're acting fearfully. You'd think at some point one of them will crack. A lot of these people are careerists, obviously. I think they betrayed their country for 20 coins of silver. That famous phrase. So I'd imagine they'd be easy to get to crack. Is there any evidence or any reports or any sources that you have that point in that direction?
I think the one who is cracked for a number of reasons is Lisa Page. I'm told, and if you'll notice, Jake, there's been very little reporting other than what you just said. There's inconsistencies, and that she provided context to the Strzok texts. And one of the things that came out of that meeting is she apparently said the texts mean exactly what they said, that they were doing things behind the scenes. And also, she was one of the folks who was the liaison to the White House for a lot of this, because she was a DOJ attorney. So if she turned, which I'd like to believe that there's something to the rumor that she opened up on a lot of things. But yeah, you're looking at some major charges. And I was told by one of my Capitol Hill sources is that Strzok, in fact, perjured himself during the testimony, and that's something they're now looking at. So it's going to take some time, because the one factor that we don't recognize without having to say it is that the very people who are accused of wrongdoing are the ones who would normally be investigating the wrongdoing. The Department of Justice and the FBI would be the agency you bring in to investigate this. So who do you have bring in to investigate this level of wrongdoing when it's when the wrongdoing was committed by those who would have to investigate? So this is a bit of a dilemma. I've given a number of individuals and organizations suggestions on how to work around it to establish something outside of the FBI and DOJ to do the investigation. There's legality for it. There's a number of laws you can use, but then it takes political will to implement that sort of thing. And a lot of folks are afraid to do anything until the Mueller investigations run its course, because obviously the big threat from the deep state is, oh, well, you don't want to interfere, to be accused of attempting to interfere with an investigation and that sort of thing. And obviously that's what they're after Trump on right now, is the idea that he somehow interfered with the investigation. So that's the one thing that is holding people back, I believe, from moving forward with an earnest and deep investigation of the FBI and DOJ on this issue.
Do you think it's possible that Barack Obama, before he left office, pardoned himself and Hillary Clinton?
That's an excellent question, and the honest answer is I don't think so. I think they were arrogant enough that they thought that the folks that they picked below them, and to include some are still there. I mean, I've talked to folks at the National Security Council, and there's still Obama loyalists there. I think they thought they picked enough stay-behinds or people who were loyal to them over the system that they'd be able to thwart any sort of effort. I think they miscalculated. I think this is a battle. This is this is a war. On a given day, both either side gains or loses ground. But I think overall, as long as people who are loyal to their oath of office and loyal to the republic, you're going to see progress made against this. I mean, the latest, I think, obvious deep state attempt to push back against the president was last night. President Trump tweeted out twice about the Daily Caller article that was out yesterday, which outlined how the ODNI, the Office of National Intelligence, Director of National Intelligence, their IG, had found that Hillary Clinton's server was compromised. And the ODNI IG attempted to pass that information to the FBI and was rebuked. The FBI refused to investigate. Well, the president tweeted out about that, and then there was an anonymous, you'll love this, anonymous FBI official who contacted NBC and said, oh, no, we investigated Hillary Clinton's server and there's no compromise. Keep in mind that the Daily Caller article lists names, dates, the basic interrogatories in detail, but this so-called official is anonymous and gave no details. So you can judge for yourself what's going on. It's, the deep state is attempting in a very ham-handed way to say, there's nothing to see here. That's the very sort of thing that happens on a daily basis on a range of these issues. So as long as you have people at the FBI who are allowed by Christopher Wray to say these sorts of things, and for the DOJ under Jeff Sessions to be kind of, I don't know how to describe it, other than it's not doing its job. As long as you've got that, it's going to be a real uphill battle.
I don't understand why Trump doesn't just start firing all these people. Like Bruce Orr still has his job. Peter Strzok had his job until weeks ago.
Right.
Why is this happening like this?
I've asked the same question. I think there's some issues regarding trying to see where the rats scramble. And I know that's not the best answer, but I think people want to see where the spider web really all goes. And as these people start panicking and getting more desperate, I think you're going to see more of the web reveal itself. It's like, when you wake up in the morning, you see the spider web all kind of lit up by morning dew. And I think that's the best analogy I can give at this point. And other than I think the appearance is correct that Jeff Sessions and DOJ is just not on top of its game right now. And, I've been told that there's things going on. I'm skeptical regarding enhanced investigations of the Clinton Foundation and other things. But, I guess we'll have to see. And I do believe that depending on how the midterms go, will determine if Jeff Sessions keeps his job. One of the issues, obviously, has been who would replace Jeff Sessions, and could the person do confirmation? And the answer is, I don't know who should. I have some ideas of who should replace him, but it's been made very clear that it would be a very difficult fight to get anybody confirmed during the in the current circumstance. So I think if the Republicans come up on top in the midterms, a pretty good chance that Sessions will be shown the door shortly thereafter.
If these FISA warrants reveal explicit malfeasance and criminality, have you heard anything regarding Jeff Sessions unrecusing himself at that point?
Yeah, I've heard that that's a discussion point. I don't know if that's practical. I don't know. I mean, if I were Sessions, I would, but I'm much more aggressive than he is in many ways. And I'm told that there are 6 documents that are out there still that will prove the very thing you just said, the actual deliberate guidance lying to the court about the nature of certain information that was needed to justify the FISA collection in the first place. So at this point, I think Don McGahn's in the news today. My understanding is Don McGahn has been one of those behind the scenes discouraging the release of those documents. So why that is, I don't know. But I do believe that we're going to see over the next few months more revelations of these warrants, which are very damning, and I think would put enough information out would require aggressive prosecution of individuals who are involved in putting together those FISA warrants.
Regarding the individuals that have ongoing court cases, George Papadopoulos, Mike Flynn, and Manafort, what is going on with the Papadopoulos case in particular? His wife has spoken out publicly saying he was set up. From everything I've read, it looks like he very well may have been set up. Are they still pushing back? Are they fighting? Because from all of my research, he could be the biggest domino in this whole thing.
Well, I think it's clear that there were 4 entities involved in getting him set up. I mean, the whole meeting with that foreign national and at the bar in London. I mean, it's like look, I've been involved in these operations. It's something that people do for purposes of trying to find out what someone's doing. And I think, again, going back to my opening comment, this was going to be a setup for the Hillary Clinton administration to use to go after Trump, to say that all these guys were involved with the Russians. And oh, by the way, I mean, we would never have known. It was a setup. So I do believe that Papadopoulos' wife is correct. I think it's something that the president and his staff are looking at. I don't know that for a fact. I believe they are. And obviously, the Mike Flynn thing is front and center to the wrongdoing of Peter Strzok, who I think conducted the actual interview with another agent in the room, and that McCabe, which is his name's not been in this lately, but McCabe is now under criminal investigation and has been referred for criminal charges because he actually changed the 302, the report, to make it look like Mike Flynn lied. So that's a material fact that, in my judgment, should basically vacate Mike Flynn plea and put that back into front and center. And then the Manafort thing. Look, I still have. Well, Manafort is not a sympathetic character. I think he was arrogant. He was maybe not as smart as he could have been by having Rick Gates, who now has admitted that he stole money and did a number of very unethical things while working for Manafort. And apparently he's skating. He's got immunity, even though he admitted to a number of very serious acts of wrongdoing. I think Manafort's got a very strong case of being set up, and not a thing that we've just talked about has a thing to do with Russian collusion. Not a thing.
Regarding Mike Flynn, do you think there's anything in the FISA warrants, the 6 FISA warrants you mentioned, that could shed light on his case?
Yes,
positively for him.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. My understanding is that a former director of CIA had gone to meet with the White House with President Biden and Susan Rice, and was a material witness to stimulating the collection against Mike Flynn. So more to come on that. I don't know when that'll all come out, but I know for a fact that the White House was involved directly in the Mike Flynn issue regarding the FISA stuff. So when it's all going to come out, I can't say. I don't have direct access or direct authority to do anything on that. But I do believe that you're going to see a lot more about what the circumstance was that led up to the Mike Flynn being collected on, and why they entrapped him, if you will, regarding the interview.
Peter Strzok changing the 302s in his interview with Mike Flynn, has this evidence been presented in court?
No, it has not. But the judge who's overseeing it has required that all exculpatory information, such as what we're talking about, be provided to the Flynn defense team. So I think that's why you're seeing a repeated postponement of sentencing of Mike Flynn. I mean, he was supposed to be sentenced back, I think, in February, and here we are coming up on September, and it's still hanging out there. And I think it's because certain information has been found, and I think it's supposed to have been shared. I don't know if it has been or not, with Mike Flynn's defense team. So that's something that the defense team should have available to it, and they should be able to work with that.
Do you think at the end of the day, when the 6 FISA warrants are released to the public and all of the knowledge, all of the background information related to this case is presented to the public, that this will be the biggest scandal in U.S. history?
The honest answer is, and I don't want to sound over the top, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about an administration at the senior level that authorized foreign counterintelligence and national security agency collection against domestic political enemies. That's huge. We talked about this years ago, Jake. I was worried, as someone who's been involved in very sensitive operations, I know the magnitude of what can be done based on what we do against foreign threats. And I think there's reasons why we have capabilities against foreign threats. I support that. That's why we pay that money. But the moment you ethically depart from your oath of office and decide that you're going to take a political side and use your office, the technology that's designed for use against foreign threats, the moment you use that against domestic political enemies, you've crossed a line. And that line cannot be crossed. And the moment you cross that line, there has to be severe penalties. So, yeah, I do see this as probably the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. And because it is that big, and I think some people have a hard time wrapping their mind around the scope, it's going to take some time for this to spin.
I pray that Republicans win in November, because if they don't, some of this, or a lot of it, could possibly go away, and we may never find out the full scope of this, because a lot of the congressional investigations will just, never be fulfilled. I mean, do you agree?
Well, I agree, and that's one of my biggest fears too. I mean, this is something that has to be aired out. And look, I have friends on the liberal side who believe that even they believe that this Russian thing is going to damage our ability to go forward as a nation, because there's a difference between honest traditional liberals and progressives. And I see the progressives and the neocons have this death pact supporting Hillary Clinton to the end, and to the end in this case means supporting the misuse and abuse of very powerful intelligence collection capabilities for purposes of using them against domestic enemies. That's very dangerous, and it could lead in many ways to the republic becoming much more akin to the Soviet Union. And I said that last year and last March, and I felt that this was Soviet level wrongdoing. And every citizen who actually wants to have the freedoms we enjoy maintained, the free enterprise system, the idea of being able to worship, being able to do fundamental things we all do on a daily basis. If you want that to become continued, then we all have to demand accountability for these transgressions.
There's so much riding on this case. An outsider thinking of running for president may not run for president in the future if things go wrong for Trump. A message is being sent to any outsider that wants to come in and change things up. You come in and change things up, and we will ruin your life. And people,
yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why they had designed the insurance policy the way it was, to ruin Trump. And that was the whole idea, to try to make sure that no individual outside the political system would ever dare come in and challenge them. And remember, Jake, this is both Democrats and Republicans. This is, folks who oppose Trump. There's a lot of Trumpers who still claim to be conservatives, who, sided with the state on this, with the wrongdoing, and they're still siding with it. So, again, I know a few liberals who have recognized what's going on. And look, I've mentioned Dennis Kucinich. Dennis, I think, has been one of the liberals who recognizes the potential damage this will do to our system. Glenn Greenwald was criticizing CNN recently for their over-the-top fake news. So there are a few people on the left who are speaking out, trying to make people understand that this is something that every American, no matter what political persuasion you are, needs to be concerned about, and people need to wake up.
Well, there definitely is. There's Glenn Greenwald. Abby Martin is talking about this. Michael Tracy from the Young Turks tweets about this a lot. There's people on the left out there who completely understand what's going on, and they understand the stakes. I mean, if you're a real leftist, if you're a committed leftist, you understand the power of the intelligence community and what they have wreaked on the left for so many years. So they have this built-in, I guess, fear of the intelligence community, where as you said, these progressives, I mean, whatever you want to label them, neoliberals or whatever, these people don't really have a cohesive ideology. They're just sort of defer to the state for central control over everything, and we have I think a dangerous group of people that were born out of the Obama years that sort of worship that style of government.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. It's very insidious, because they always drape whatever they're doing in the kindlest, gentlest terms, like, oh, well, fair, we want to be fair, and we want to try to take care of folks, and we can't have verbiage which indicate that people are racist and things like that. If you oppose them, you're a racist. They start name calling. They're very violent. Antifa is an extension of their beliefs. So yeah, it's a very dangerous time, and I think that's why I think most Americans have woken up, even if they don't like Trump. They recognize the danger to the system of the people who oppose Trump and what they represent.
Yeah, his approval rating is amazingly high for how much daily crap the mainstream media just dumps on him.
Right.
He's at 44%. I mean, that's Obama level 2 years in. I mean, it's incredible, really.
I think people have woken up. I like to believe they have. And, the more the mainstream media piles on and tries to basically just use their venue for purposes of attacks and hate, I'd like to believe people will see this what it is. And again, I hope people do pay attention to what's coming out on the insurance policy, and how, the FBI, DOJ, and others threw in their capabilities for purposes of supporting a single political candidate. It's very dangerous.
Before we go here, Colonel,
Yeah.
I would like to get. Would Can you make a prediction? Is that possible for you?
Well, I'll do my best to make a forecast. I mean, on what area you want me to forecast on?
The FISA warrants are released. Let's say in October.
Yeah.
You know, it's wall to wall news on the FISA warrants, at least in the conservative media. Um, predict the outcome of the midterm elections with the voters having that knowledge.
I still believe there. I don't see a blue wave coming. I just don't. Well, I see there's little pockets of progressives making progress, and I know that there was a progressive candidate on the Democrat side who won the Florida primary last night. I still believe that most Americans are going to vote with their pocketbook. They're going to vote with what they feel about their daily lives. And I do believe that President Trump has made a good case that his policies, not Obama's, has resulted in a spectacular expansion of our economy. We're talking about 4 to 5% growth. I think most Americans are going to see that. I think I'm one of those who understands that tariffs aren't necessarily a good thing, but they're helping. I know states like yours, New York and Pennsylvania and others, Wisconsin, were hurt by the lack of interest in the blue collar folks. I know President Trump respects hard work. I think he wants to see the American worker benefit. So I think a lot of those folks who were abandoned by the Democrat Party will continue to cross over and support the president. So I don't believe we're going to see a blue wave, and I think by some miracle we're going to see both houses of Congress stay Republican.
I don't think people understand how important economically Trump is, because in the Obama years, I remember people in the mainstream media, New York Times, elsewhere, writing articles like low growth is the new normal.
Right.
And our national debt is up to 20 trillion. Our GDP is just, barely past that. Without intense growth over the next 8 years, we could easily be heading into, Greece territory, where our debt is 160% of GDP, and things really start falling apart. With 5% yearly GDP growth, we give ourselves a real buffer against inflation and all sorts of negative economic problems. So the debt, say our GDP is 30 trillion in 5 years, and our debt is 22 trillion. That debt matters a lot less in 5 years than it does today.
Absolutely. You've got to grow the economy and grow the productivity for purposes of offsetting that. And I mean, you got it. Most people, I wish, boy, Jake, I wish everybody could hear your show, because that's it. That's the key. We've got to go in that direction. And look, I believe the policy was slow growth. I believe they were strangling the economy. There was no interest in seeing the American worker thrive. And again, I think that's why Wisconsin and Michigan went in the direction of Trump, because a lot of folks want to have productive lives. They don't want to be retrained after a lifetime of working on cars or mining coal to do something else. I think that the real brilliance of Trump is to let the American worker be the American worker. I said this in several. I do talks across the nation, and I've said this several times. I'm a big train fan. I love trains. Your area, by the way, I love all the railroads in your area of the state of New York. Just great. And I see these long trains, container freight trains, of all this material coming out of China. There's not a reason in the world, Jake, that American workers couldn't make that stuff better and cheaper than the Chinese. And so I'm one of those that have said we need to be filling those containers to go outside of the country, not having them come in with stuff. And I think that's what the president wants. That's why I walked away from NAFTA. That's why I walked away from the Canadians and the Mexicans on this, because it wasn't a good deal for the American worker. So it's things like that. I do believe. I'd like to really believe that blue dog Democrats are going to see that the president is on their side, that he does want to see him productive, and that their party, the Democrat Party, abandoned him for purposes of embracing certain agendas which will essentially hurt the American people.
Yeah, I don't think Americans grasp enough how important the presidency of Donald Trump is. After 8 years of Hillary, you could reasonably predict, or you could reasonably what would be the right word? You could reasonably say, I guess, that at the end of her presidency, if she went all 8 years, we would be sputtering into economic catastrophe.
I think we'd be careening into catastrophe, to be honest with you, Jake. And yeah, look, these people, the Democrats, Hillary, and all of them, they all think first of a political narrative over the reality of what they do. They always want to be judged by intentions, not on the actions that come from their work. And I don't normally tout series which I'm not involved in or productions I'm not involved in, but there's a great HBO show called The Final Year, where I think it started out to be a victory lap of the Obama administration's foreign policy. And there's a scene that was going around about 2 months ago of Ben Rhodes crying. That scene, from election night, he was crying on election night from the loss. And that scene was taken from that show I just mentioned from the last year. And I encourage people to watch it by the fact it illustrates exactly how they would use political thinking to triangulate every action, and those actions resulted in catastrophic failure after catastrophic failure because they had no interest in trying to deal with the facts in front of them. They would always try their best to make their very obtuse political beliefs fit the situation. And that's why, and I think Hillary Clinton would have done that very thing from the office of the president, and it would have resulted in catastrophic failure of the nation across the board.
Well, they're kind of doing that now, even though they don't have the Congress, the Senate, or the presidency, or the courts. Since they've lost all power in those areas, they've shifted their ideological struggle to the internet, and now they're deplatforming conservative voices.
Right.
They're attacking conservatism through their corporate their corporate agenda. But see, I don't think conservatives understand what the reaction needs to be. I don't think the reaction needs to be give the government more power. I think conservatives are kind of being baited in that sense. I think what conservatives need to do is they need to start their own parallel world. They need to start banking, web hosting services, whatever. They just to survive.
Right. Yeah, no, it's absolutely correct. And again, I've always appreciated your program from the beginning of our talking, because you guys have always been willing to take on very difficult issues. What? I mean, so it's important to have a media that's willing to do that. And simply put, like you said, the left wing mainstream media is just not willing to tell the truth. And that's very dangerous.
Thank you very much, Colonel Anthony Shaffer. I
Sure.
recommend everyone go out, check out Colonel Anthony Shaffer's Twitter. It's at tspooky. I'm sorry. Can you at Captain?
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so T spooky with T every letter underscore. T spooky spelled out with underscores between the letters, and people can look for just Google Tony Shaffer Twitter, and it comes up. It's pretty easy to find. So, but thanks, Jake, again for having me.
No problem. You can catch Colonel Shaffer all over the media: Fox News, CNN, BBC, wherever you find news and issues being covered. Colonel Anthony Shaffer is there. Again, thanks again, Colonel. Love to have you back on again in the future.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Colonel.
Take care.
You too.